The first of the Fishers to come to Britain was born around 1040 in Brittany. Not much can be said of him, besides the fact that, thanks to his noble status, he received a good education and lived a life of comfort compared to the common man at this time. In 1066, along with his brother, the Fisher Knight joined the army of the Duke of Normandy in that man's attempt to take the English throne. On October 14th, the Fisher brothers fought at the Battle of Hastings, where the last Anglo-Saxon king, Harold Godwinson, lost his life and the Normans conquered England. It is not known why, but shortly after Hastings, the Fisher Knight decided England wasn't for him. And so the brothers split up, the Fisher Knight making his way to Scotland, where he settled in Perthshire and swore loyalty to the chief of Clan Robertson and joined his tribe. Whom he married is unknown, though she was a Clan Robertson member. They had a large brood of children, 5 in all, and they had a plethora of descendants, but the records get sketchy, so it is hard to piece together a firm line of descent. Therefore, we need to skip several generations until we reach a descendant of this Fisher we can trace with confidence through the years. William was born in 1463 in Perthshire, a member of Clan Robertson. Who his parents were is not entirely clear, but whoever they were, he inherited the trade of tartan making from them. Somehow, through the years, most likely descending from younger sons, William's side of the Fisher family lost their noble status and took up the profession of tartan makers to get by. In 1505, William married a fellow clan member, Beatrice Robertson, and had 3 children: John, born in 1507 in Stirling; Marion, born in 1508 in Stirling; Thomas, born 1511 in Stirling. William lived in Stirling until his death in 1546. Beatrice died a few years later in 1550. A tartan maker for Clan Robertson and other allies like his father and grandfather before him, John would marry Martha, surname unknown, but likely Robertson, sometime in 1528. Together the couple had 1 son, Thomas, born 1530 in Stirling. John died in 1577. Martha's death date is unknown. Little exists of Thomas today, neither his profession is known. He married Mary Keith in 1555. They had 1 son, William, in 1560. Mary was one of the daughters of William Keith, Ford Marshal of Scotland and chief of Clan Keith, and his wife, Margaret Keith, daughter of William Keith of Inverriggy and Lady Janet Grey, Baroness of Lawes. Born in Dunnottar Castle, the family estate, it is unknown how she met Thomas Fisher, but, given her high rank in Scottish society, it is clear he or his family rose from humble origins within a few generations. It is unknown when Thomas died. Mary departed this life on March 11 age, 1619, in Arbuthnot, Kincardine. William's life, much like his father's, is a mystery in many ways, the details slim. He enjoyed the wealth his family accumulated and used it to marry Mary Ann Roche in 1578 in Stirling. Mary Ann came from a well-to-do family originally from Ireland, the daughter of Charles Roche and Elizabeth Kenny. Both sides of her family were Anglo-Irish in origin, tracing back to English settlers in Ireland shortly after the 1169 invasion. When her family moved to Scotland is unknown. Like his ancestors, William was content to remain in Stirling all his life, creating tartans for Clan Robertson. He died in 1623, Mary Ann as well. John was the first Fisher in many generations to seek out a life for himself beyond Stirling and Clan Robertson. When he was a young man, Scotland's king, James, became the King of England and Ireland upon the death of his cousin, Elizabeth I, and this set in motion events that would shape the course of John's life and British history as a whole. King James was a devout Protestant who, like many in his times, viewed the native Irish, most of whom were Catholic, as savage and rebellious by nature. He wanted to create a scheme to uproot these perceived savages and plant in their place loyal Scot, Welsh, and English subjects. Thus was born the plan for the plantation of Ulster, formally begun in 1606, and by 1609 picked up steam. The land the king cleared for settlements belonged to Irish clans who lost their territories when their chiefs fled after their defeat in the 9 Years' War, the Crown confiscating it and kicking the native Irish off sometime brutally. Hundreds of settlers, mainly from lowland Scotland but some from northern England and Wales, sailed across the Irish Sea into the north of Ireland where they hoped to build new lives. John, having married Martha Venner, a Scottish woman of Norman descent. In 1609, and being a father of one child, a boy named Samuel, became one of these settlers a year later. Just before they set off, Martha gave birth to another son, James, who would only spend a week in the land of his birth, his family making the crossing thereafter. The Fishers settled in the tranquil glens of Antrim, joining hundreds of other Scots who bought plots of land from Randall MacDonnell, chief of Clan MacDonnell and Lord of Antrim. Unlike in other parts of the north, the native Irish still lived in the glens, and the incoming Scots got to know them, intermingling. John continued to practice tartan making in Ireland, becoming renowned for it. Besides Samuel and James, he and Martha had 4 more children: Mary, born 1618, Charles, born 1619, Martha, born 1620, William, born 1621. The Fishers lived alongside the native Irish well, and while many Scots continued to hold on to their Scottish identity well into the 2nd or 3rd generation, the children of John and Mary from the start considered themselves Irish, albeit of Scottish origins. John Fisher passed away in the glens of Antrim in 1641. Mary died the same year. For the first few decades of James's life, he knew peace. The community of the glens offering a place where all Irish, whether of native blood or not, could live alongside each other in harmony. In these times he met his wife, Elizabeth Torrance. Elizabeth was a rare breed in those days, a lone immigrant woman trying to make her way in the world. Originally from Winston, a small village in Suffolk in eastern England, she had come to the north of Ireland without her family, without anyone to accompany her. How she earned her way to Ireland, what her familial connections were, or why she chose the Emerald Isle, are all unknown questions, but she must have been a strong and resourceful soul to brave such a crossing alone. She and James met prior to 1636 when their first child, James, was born. They went on to have 6 more: John, born 1637, Samuel, born 1641, Martha, born 1645, Elizabeth, born 1646, Alice, born 1648, Rachel, born 1649. While their marriage began peacefully, in 1641, Ireland erupted into war as the native Irish rebelled against their English oppressors in a bid to retake their lands as well as to gain religious freedom, tired of Protestant discrimination. Rory O'More, a noble who descended from one of the oldest native Irish noble families, gathered allies together under his banner and began making war in Ulster to drive out the English and Scottish settlers. The only ones spared were the Old English families, those of English or Welsh blood who traced their descent from settlers in 1169, due to how culturally similar they were to the natives by this point in time. The Fishers, like all settlers, whether they had a sense of being Irish or not, needed to defend themselves in this new hellscape. Each family owned firearms and local communities formed militias. There is no direct evidence of the Fishers being involved in armed conflict, but raids by Woodkern, native Irish raiders, was a common occurrence during these times, so it is highly likely they needed to defend themselves at least once or twice. This conflict, known as the Irish Confederate Wars, lasted 13 long bloody years, resulting in the total deaths of over 600,000 on every side, making it the bloodiest conflict in Irish history. In the end, Rory O'More's dream of a free Ireland came to naught. Instead, the English, under Oliver Cromwell, crushed the Irish rebels in 1653 and slaughtered countless innocent people, both native and English, Scottish, and others. Luckily for the Fishers, none of their members died due to the wars, but one can only imagine the horrors they endured during this time. James Fisher died on June 10, 1677 at the age of 66, having outlived Elizabeth, who died on January 31, 1653, by 24 years. This James diversified the family business. Instead of only making tartans for the Irish and Scottish clans, James went into linen production as well. As a young man, he left the Glens, moving to the city of Londonderry, one of the most important cities in the north, where he established a successful weaving business. In 1660, James married Janet Cochrane, the Londonderry-born daughter of Robert Cochrane and Eleanor Simpson. Janet's father, also born in Ulster, belonged to an earlier wave of Scottish immigrants that predated the Ulster plantation era, his grandparents on both sides being Scottish immigrants. Janet's mother, Eleanor, born in Ulster, came from an English family, both of her parents, John and Elizabeth, born and raised in the village of Fairstead, Essex. Together, James and Janet had 14 children: Elizabeth, born 1661, John Christopher, born 1662, Catherine, born 1663, James, born 1664, William and Mary, born 1666, Samuel, born 1668, Rebecca, born 1669, James, born 1670, Matthew, born 1671, Martha, born 1674, John, born 1675. The biggest and most tragic event to happen in the lives of the Fishers during their time in Londonderry was the 3-month-long siege of the city in 1689. In 1689, the Glorious Revolution took place that saw the overthrow of James II, King of England, Scotland, and Ireland, due to his being a convert to Catholicism, seeing him replaced by the Dutchman William of Orange and his wife, James' younger sister, Mary. As one might expect, the usurped king did not go quietly into the night. He gathered his allies, both Catholics tired of religious discrimination and those Protestants loyal to him out of duty, and made his way to Ireland, where he planned to make his stand. In Ireland he found support from Richard Talbot, the Viceroy of the island, and Earl of Tyrconnell, who was a loyal follower of the king. An Irishman who came from an Anglo-Irish family, Tyrconnell wasted little time in throwing his support behind James, but others in Ireland weren't on board. Those in the north, especially those of the Presbyterian branch of Protestantism, the Fishers among them, refused to acknowledge James as their king, his Catholicism making him unpopular and hated among many of the Scots-Irish, as they were becoming known to distinguish them from the native Irish and Anglo-Irish. Londonderry and Enniskillen declared their support for King William and Queen Mary, bringing down the wrath of the former king. He ordered Alexander MacDonell, the Lord of Antrim, to march on Londonderry and capture it for his cause, but before MacDonell could reach it, the citizens locked the gates and refused to allow any of the king's men inside. Thus, the siege of Londonderry began.